Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. Today's conversation is with Angel Murdock. I met Angel at a dinner party while I was in Park City for the Sundance Film Festival. And I learned a little bit about her while we were all just having light conversation around the dining room table. Angel's a nurse midwife and a women's health adventurer. She's also a rock climber and a wife and a mother of 4. I was really intrigued by Angel, and most specifically, I was intrigued by the trip she recently took to Nepal, and it didn't take me long to realize she was someone I really wanted to chat with. She was such a great sport that within a couple of days, we were sitting down together to record this. Angel was a part of a team who trekked through the Dolpo region of Nepal late last year. And what they were doing is providing medical care to people in very remote villages. And she was able to bring her skills as a midwife to the program. And the program's called Nomads Clinic. And it's run through the Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe. And basically, they provide services to women who have never had access to it before. And specifically, this organization provided menstruation kits to women who previously had to deal with their monthly cycle in unimaginable ways, and really at least unimaginable to me. In addition to that, they also provided very simple services and medications to pregnant women. And these are life-saving services that were really so simple, but just the area is so remote in the Himalayas that these women just don't have the education and they don't have access to this stuff. So not only is Angel, who totally lives up to her name, by the way, not only is she part of this amazing program, but as I said, she's married and she's got 4 kids. So here she is spending a month away from home trekking with basic services herself, camping, that sort of thing. And she's at altitude, and here she is putting her medical skills to work. And it's not like she set out to make this a way of life for herself. She kind of stumbled into it, but it resonated with her. The opportunity resonated with her to such a degree that she just knew she had to jump on the chance to do it. Before you hear that conversation, and it really is just a really sweet conversation with this gal, just a quick reminder that if you're new to the podcast, I encourage you to go back to previous episodes where I highlight other interesting and courageous women doing extraordinary things. When you listen to these previous conversations, you'll discover strong women who have overcome adversity, they've started businesses, they've challenged themselves in a variety of ways, they've traveled the world like Angel, they've attained status as world-class athletes and given up secure jobs to pursue their dreams and passions. So really a wide range of women, but they're all being bold. You can find all the episodes at BeBoldPodcast.com, or you can subscribe wherever you find podcasts such as iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. So please enjoy this conversation with Angel Murdock. And as you'll hear, we actually had a guest appearance by Lexi the dog as well. So please enjoy. I noticed that the region where you were, I think, in Nepal was the Dolpo region. Is that right?
Yes. So it's in the northwest.
The northwest part of the country.
Yeah. And primarily, very rural, very few roads.
Mm-hmm. Are there any roads at all?
There's a handful, and we saw a few road construction projects, probably only in the very last week that we were there, but by and large, we didn't see any vehicles. I'd say 90% of the time. We saw a few motorcycles here and there, but really...
Most of it's walking in.
Yeah. No roads, no infrastructure. There was one village that had electricity in a few homes.
And that's all the government bringing it in, the road systems?
The roads.
Yeah.
And I think that what we saw were partial programs or partially constructed roads that either had been abandoned or from what all the Nepali trekkers with us said is that nothing seems to get finished because the government turnover is so great.
Oh, that's terrible.
And so, they'll get a minister in power who has these big plans, and then 6 months later he's gone.
And then the new guy has relatives somewhere else, probably.
And they have a different plan. And so, I think it's very frustrating for them.
Yeah. Well, I've been looking at the Dolpo region for a while because there's a big trek there. I think it's a 40-day trek. I think that it's a loop because someone had approached me about doing a tour there. And so it's been on my radar. And then when I saw that information, you and I spoke a couple of nights ago, and I think you mentioned the Dolpo area, but I missed that. And then when I was researching and kind of looking up some of the information, I saw Dolpo, and I thought, oh my gosh, the Dolpo! Oh, wow.
Yeah. I think they call it Upper Dolpo. They get a lot of trekking because the loop will go around Lake Foxundo, which is that high altitude holy lake that has just this iridescent green aqua color, and it's beautiful.
The glacial runoff.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. When we were there were actually government scientists gathering samples because nothing more than one cell can live in that water. It's a very deep lake, and there's no swimming in it because it's holy. There's a large monastery on one side of the lake.
And you've been there. Have you been to the monastery?
Yeah.
Is it a big monastery?
I would say medium-sized. There's the small part of it that's been there for 600 or 800 years, and then a larger monastery that maybe 400 or 500 years.
Yeah.
The new part.
It's the new one. How long does it take for you to get into that area?
So I think we were in the Foxundo area about week 3.
And in total, you were there for a month?
Yeah.
Okay, trekking for a month.
Yeah. I think we were out on the trail about 28 days, give or take a day. So, we did health clinics in 5 different rural villages and ended up treating 1,200 people.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. This was the first year that they had a women's healthcare provider, and I think that they'd done a little bit of women's health, as primary care in the years past, but I think once we had a fully dedicated women's health tent clinic and stocked with all women's health stuff and meds, and the fact that I could evaluate pregnant women, all stages.
Yeah.
We brought in a portable ultrasound, so I was doing ultrasounds on pregnant women, and we brought 50 birth kits because 80+% of women in Nepal give birth at home unattended, and so we were able to bring clean birth kit supplies, all packaged nicely with visual drawn instructions because a lot of them don't read. So it was basically clean, sterile, basic birth supplies, and we did education with them, with the pregnant women that we gave them to, and then also included a life-saving medicine called Cytotec, which the number one reason for maternal mortality in the world is postpartum hemorrhage. And so it's a medicine that can be given orally, just little tablets that prevents the vast majority of those.
Is it just given automatically? Like they don't have to have any signs of illness. It's just given to them, and that
we can
helps.
Do it prophylactically or in the moment. And so we included those in the kits.
So I should say I'm here today with Angel Murdock and Lexi, which
Lexi
is
the dog.
Yeah, and we're at a friend's home, and Lexi the dog. So folks might hear her in the background if she gets excited, or if a car goes by, or a squirrel or something. Who knows? So I know there's a bobcat in the area too. So if the bobcat comes out, who knows? But before we get too far down that, because I do have a lot of questions before we get too into the details of what you've done.
Sure.
Can you give us a bigger picture of the program that you're that you're part of, the time that you just spent in Nepal, and
Sure.
just give some really broad stroke overview of that. And then I will likely interrupt a lot because I'll have a lot of questions for you. But yeah, I'd like to know kind of the big picture. Let's start there.
Yeah, so I'm a certified nurse midwife. I work normally in Utah, and I became affiliated with Upaya Zen Center as a meditator and learned of their yearly trek to Nepal as Nomads clinic.
And those folks are located in Santa Fe, just outside of Santa Fe, right?
Yeah. Yes. And the Roshi of the Zen Center is Joan Halifax, and she started this trekking humanitarian pilgrimage, bringing healthcare to rural communities in Nepal. I think it's over 20 years, perhaps 25. But I am new to it. This last fall, September of 2017, was my first foray with them. And it was the first year that they had a fully dedicated women's health tent and a women's healthcare provider, me.
So they had been doing healthcare programs in Nepal, but it just didn't have the women's component to it in the past.
Right. It was a lot of primary care, pediatrics, pain management, physical therapy, traditional Amchi medicine, acupuncture, things like that. And what we learned, which is not surprising to me, given what I do, we were definitely inundated with women coming with all sorts of concerns. And they had been largely, underrepresented in the options that they could get for healthcare. A lot of them don't ever leave the rural villages that they live in. If they ever occasionally see a healthcare provider, it's not usually a women's healthcare provider. It's a traditional Amchi, a man, coming to give them herbs for X, Y, or Z. And so when women found out that they would be able to be evaluated by another woman for their female issues, we had women walking sometimes 2-3 days.
So the word got out.
Yeah. It spread quickly. Because Roshi Joan Halifax is well known there, and within the Buddhist community, they were able to spread word beforehand that we would be coming.
Okay.
And so, each place that we went, there were people from that particular village and people who had walked in. And we also found that on our about 18 days of trekking to get to different villages, people would come out and find us. They would come down the mountain. We would do
just kind of stumble upon what you were doing, and they wanted to be evaluated.
So it was really rewarding.
Now, I don't know, maybe this isn't the main thing, but the piece of it that caught my attention so much was the menstrual kits that you were working on, and you actually came prepared. It wasn't something. This was something that I'm assuming the Nomad clinics had been working on and kind of preparing for a long time, because it's not a last minute thing that you figure out. So talk about that. Yeah.
So for about the 9 months prior, once I decided to go and was accepted to go, I started talking to people who had gone on prior years and asking about what they felt the needs were. And then also from my dozen years of experience being a nurse midwife and seeing many different cultures and the universal needs and concerns of women, we identified some areas that were lacking for women in rural Nepal. And one of the big ones was that they have no menstrual hygiene kits or capabilities. So the women have, for generations, simply been layering their clothes. They will wear 2-3 pairs of pants under their long skirts. They don't have underwear. They don't have...
Because they don't have access to it?
Well, I think, a lot of it is that, like so many things as women, if it's not a problem to the powers that be, it's just ignored. And so it was just something that women were expected to deal with. In some of the rural communities, menstruation is so taboo that they will stay in menstrual huts and be isolated from the family.
I've heard of something very similar in India where when it's that time, they just have to go and be by themselves.
Yeah. And so I worked with a nurse who grew up in Dolpo. She's from Do Terup in Dolpo region. And so she's a nurse working most of the year in Kathmandu, but she's gone as a nurse helping with Nomads Clinic for a handful of years. So she was really my point person. And so we worked over a handful of months kind of identifying what would be the most benefit for the women in the Dolpo region. And the menstrual hygiene kits were one of the biggest ways that we felt like we could make an immediate and real impact in their lives, because without those, some of the girls were staying home from school. The women had a really high rate of skin irritation and breakdown, so they had higher rates of infection and discomfort, along with just the discomfort of trying to walk around and manage that.
In 2 pairs of pants.
Right. And water is a really scarce and valuable commodity in that region. And so for these women, they don't have a lot of water to do daily laundry and those kind of things. So they would be putting back on, dried, really uncomfortable clothing. And we wanted to change that. And we brought 250 menstrual hygiene kits. They are reusable. They are made in Kathmandu by Nepali women, sourced locally. And each $8 kit can last for several years.
And it's just a matter of washing it out. And then it's reusable.
Yeah, we taught them how to wash and dry each of the pads. There's 8 flannel pads using the least amount of water to get them clean. And we had lines of women. Some women waited 4 to 6 hours just to get a kit.
Did you have those? Now, you said you had 5 different villages that you visited?
Yeah.
Did you have them divvied up? So you had,
we did
5 in each village. Yeah.
Yeah. So
or 50 in each village.
Exactly. Yeah. And in every single village, we ran out of them the very first day and had, women. We had to turn away women. We realized that, this is a bigger need than we even thought. And so since then, we have committed to continuing to bring menstrual hygiene kits to the women of rural regions of Nepal. And we plan to bring about 2,000 this coming year, Nomads Clinic Trek in the fall of 2018. But this last month, we were able to distribute 400 menstrual hygiene kits to what they call Nomads Winter Clinic. And
so each time you go back, you'll bring more and more. Okay. And then are you going to the same villages, the same 5 villages?
This year will be different. I actually don't think there's any overlap. It's the same region, but I don't think we'll be in any of the same villages.
And the women from the 5 villages that you visited, and there were, like you said, you didn't have enough to give out. Do those other women, kind of the ones that missed out on that, do they have a way to now access those kits some way, or to make them themselves?
Yes, excellent question. That's one of the really exciting things about it, because the materials that are used are, basic flannel. And of course it doesn't have to be flannel, but anyone who has basic sewing skills can replicate it really easily. And so we did find in a couple of the villages that one of the local women had a sewing machine, and
so she just became everyone's best friend.
Yes, that's exactly it. We saw people approaching the one woman, and they were already making plans before the day was even out. Yeah, so we were hoping that we talked about it could become micro enterprises for any women who want to be able to make that a small business, or just to teach their daughters and make it something that really can make a long-lasting impact generation after generation, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Is there a plan to get sewing machines or to send someone in there to actually do the training to make the kits?
Yes. So the local company that we were using for the initial kits is called Days for Girls, and they're an international organization based in a lot of different countries, including the United States. And they offer training and programs, but for the women in the really rural areas of Nepal to go to Kathmandu for 1 to 2 weeks, let alone come up with the funds to pay for this course, at this point doesn't seem feasible. And so we do have a handful of local Nepali women healthcare workers who have been continuing to stay in touch and make sure that women have the resources.
Right.
We have been able to, we've gotten, I believe, 4 sewing machines donated. And
are there sewing machines available in Nepal? Like, I know it's relatively developed, and it's very close to India where you can get pretty much anything, but I also realize it can be difficult to get items into the country.
Yeah,
do they have access to them?
Yes. I think it's, as you said, can certainly be a logistics issue, but I think the bigger issue is electricity. And so one of the things that we've tried to do each village that we go through is leave solar panel.
Yeah, just like leave the big solar panels for them.
Yeah.
Does that generate enough electricity for them to use the sewing machine?
Probably for only a short amount of time.
And is it inconceivable that they would be hand sewing them?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
Not at all. So I think they're not huge projects, and the women there are a lot of excellent seamstresses who do everything from hand,
And when you have the motivation, when you have the reason behind why you need something, you'll figure out how to do it. I don't even sew, but if I was in their situation, I would figure out how to sew to get myself one of those.
Likewise,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Likewise. I think it actually, after going through some of these villages and seeing women who are making their own thread and yarn and dyeing them, they're used to producing clothing and garments without any electricity. So I don't think it'll be a something that will keep them from making these kits for themselves.
No, I can't imagine. What kind of opportunities would you see that they now have because of this kind of solution for them?
So what we have been hearing back from the women that we most recently, distributed was simply an ease in their daily life. It's one less thing that they have to worry about, and it improves their self-image. It improves their self-esteem. One woman was so excited because she was a new bride, and she felt so much more comfortable about how she could present herself and just more comfortable in her skin.
Is it arranged marriages in Nepal?
Yes and no. In the last generation or two, there's a lot more love marriages, but certainly we encountered plenty of arranged marriages.
But I imagine it's not like here where, generally in the U.S., there's a longer courtship and you know someone literally very intimately.
Right.
And it's easier to be confident or just
comfortable.
To be comfortable. And I can imagine that especially that's something that they wouldn't talk about in Nepal, especially with their new husband.
Yes.
So that's a great point that makes her more comfortable.
Yeah. I think, anything that we can do to make women's lives easier and make them, increase their dignity and their humanity, and make them feel heard and valued. I think that's the biggest gift of this. These women are tough and strong, and they've been making it work. I feel like they don't need my Western perspective, but if they find it helpful, I want to be there for them.
One of the things that I learned, I was just in India in the fall, and I don't know why it didn't occur to me But our guide had mentioned that for the women, they they don't go to the bathroom all day long because they're working in the fields and they can't go in the fields in daylight because it's men and women who are out there, so they don't go in the fields.
Right.
And then they don't want to go at night because there's the chance that they'll get raped in the dark. So they have to bring a friend and they have to go out. And there's just no toilets. There's no bathrooms for them. I believe that the current president has a kind of a mandate where he's trying to get a bathroom per house, which is amazing. I mean, it seems so basic.
Right, but huge.
Yeah, but it is a huge thing, especially when you hear that kind of story. So I heard that story just a couple months ago, and then hearing this story, and it's like something that I just take for granted.
Right.
And then to think that it's so impactful, like such a relatively easy thing to solve can make such a huge difference in someone's life.
It's true. Trekking for that month through the rural area in Nepal and not having even an outhouse type facility for probably 24 out of the 28 days, I definitely was able to see firsthand how difficult it can be. And, I don't have the cultural
stigma
attached to it, so I'm more comfortable as a camping hiking person to go behind a rock,
right. Well, there's the cultural thing, and then there's just your work, like exactly what you do. You're in that business like all the time. So you just have you have a clinical or a medical background in terms of that too.
But I recognize that there were times when we were on trails high up, that were only passable by one person. We were single file, that the men could actually just stand and pee over the edge. And the women, some of my trekking partners, they would hold it as well and me being the outspoken feminist that I am, I was like, oh no, everybody stop, and any woman who wants to go ahead on the trail, go ahead, and we're going to guard this. It doesn't make sense,
and it's just not healthy,
right?
Yeah, not healthy at all.
No, and so I do think that things are changing, in regards to cultural expectations, and the women are recognizing within each other their value and using their collective voice.
Did you feel any resistance from the men?
I would say minimally. It was hard for me to know if it was curiosity or anxiety or fear. But when we would sit outside doing the menstrual hygiene kit distribution, and it was basic biology, fertility, cycle education, and teaching women about their bodies, that, it's another thing we take for granted, or at least I do. Growing up in public education in America, women or girls get information about their bodies. And I met women who had 6, 7 children and didn't understand their cycles. They didn't understand when they were fertile. They didn't understand exactly what was happening when they got pregnant. And just the look on their faces when our Nepali nurse Angmo was going through all that, it was beautiful to see. It was opening an entire new world for them and giving them, knowledge is power. And that in and of itself gives them opportunities and autonomy that they...
And confidence,
Yeah. It was really beautiful to see. But to the men part, we found some men kind of high up on the hill would kind of linger, and they were peeking around, and we would have to go chase them off because it was making some of the women uncomfortable. And so I don't know if it was curiosity or...
Well, here's this blonde woman, and I'm sure you weren't the only one, walking through there, but there had to be that kind of curiosity as well.
Yeah. It's time. One of the things that I think is what I've found just from doing this the last few months is that Angmo, who is Nepali, she really sees all the layers and the nuance that that I can't see. And so she is making a big push for involving the men in the communities. With this most recent distribution that they did this last week of 400 hygiene kits, she had the men, the partners of the women and the male clinic support, pass out the kits to the women.
That had to be uncomfortable.
Perhaps, but I wouldn't have tackled that because I don't know the what's culturally appropriate. But Angmo, to her credit,
I can't imagine men here doing that, to like handing it out to their
yeah,
partners.
Yeah, it's very progressive.
Yeah.
It's very progressive.
It is.
But she said, this is a part of men's lives too. If they are partnered with women or they have daughters, they have mothers, the burden shouldn't be exclusively on women. And
if Angmo if she doesn't treat it as an oddity or strangely, then they won't either, right?
Yeah.
That, as a stigma, right?
Exactly.
Then if she just treats it normally, then they'll just take it on themselves,
Yeah.
I'm sure. So I understand, and I just learned this recently, that the women in that region, and this could be far more reaching than I even know, that the women normally when they give birth, it's cesarean. Is that right?
Yes. So the infant and maternal morbidity and mortality rates in Nepal are pretty abysmal. They're about 10 times higher than the rate in the U.S. and we're behind a lot of industrialized countries in the world. So it's saying
we do have a
We
higher mortality rate than, like, let's say Norway or
Exactly.
Switzerland or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's saying a lot. And there's a handful of reasons. The two that are easiest to see are that about 80-85% of women in Nepal give birth at home totally unattended. And so they don't have skilled birth attendants, they don't have midwives, and they don't have clean birth supplies. Simple things like washing your hands or having a sterile blade to cut the cord has a huge impact. And so women and babies are dying from simple things like hypothermia, blood loss, infection, because they don't have access to birth care and clean hygiene.
Oh, Lexi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you go ahead?
Almost.
She'll be in the background anyway.
All right. The 15% of women who have access and funds, resources to get medical care, prenatal care, and give birth in the hospital, the vast majority of them end up with C-sections. So in some places, the C-section rate is between 75 and 90% in some hospitals.
So it's not necessarily the ones that are in these villages that are having the C-sections.
Correct.
I see. Okay, so the ones who are...
It's almost as if you present to a doctor and a hospital, no matter your situation, the clinical scenario, you almost certainly will get a C-section. And the vast majority of women, that's not the best, safest thing for them and for their babies. And so we've got this model currently that is no intervention or over intervention. And both of those things are causing harm to moms and babies. One of the things that we are doing as we travel through these rural villages is bringing sterile and clean birth supplies.
Right, so that was at the birth kit that you were
Yeah.
talking about earlier. I
Yeah.
see, okay.
So we encountered, I would say maybe 20 to 30 pregnant women, and we brought 50 birth kits, and they're very simple, but for most of the women, it's all that's needed to prevent infection and can prevent death. And so they included, clean drapes, because a lot of the women give birth on the dirt floor.
On their huts, in their huts. In smoke-filled rooms, I'm sure.
Right. And so soap, sterile cord clamps, or clean strings, either is sufficient. A sterile 30-cent sterile scalpel blade to cut the umbilical cord, instead of just the knife that they've slaughtered the goat with last week. And then doing simple teaching about keeping baby warm, getting baby skin to skin, breastfeeding right away. Those things both benefit mom and baby because it helps mom her own hormone cascade to cramp down and slow bleeding. We also distributed a medicine called Cytotec that can prevent and control postpartum hemorrhage.
Right, which you mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, it's the leading cause of maternal death worldwide, and they're inexpensive pills, and they don't have to be stored a certain way, and can just be administered orally.
Are there other organizations that are doing these types of women's clinics in Nepal? But I'm just thinking like
internationally.
Internationally.
Yeah, there are in Nepal. There's an organization. I hope I get it right. I can look it up if I'm.
And I'll add it to
wrong.
the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah, too. So I'll get it right in the show notes.
I think it's called Maternal Safety Network. Or birth safety networks in Nepal, something like that.
Okay.
But there are small nonprofit groups that are Nepal-based that are trying to tackle these things, but there aren't great government and institutional initiatives yet.
I would imagine the Gates Foundation is probably all over something like this.
Yeah, and I do have a few ideas and contacts that hopefully over time we can work with our contacts on the ground. There's an organization called Pronto International, which a friend, a colleague, midwife of mine started, which is a simple training for really community members, but also birth attendants. And it's a simulation walkthrough training of how to handle basic obstetric emergencies. And it is currently rolled out in several countries in Africa, also India. And so I've been working with, that's one thing that we're hoping, but whether it's 1 year off, 5 years off, whether
That's
it's
through Upaya.
This is actually through a colleague of mine. Her name's Susanna Cohen, but it could be
Something completely different than what you're doing.
Yeah,
okay,
but
I see.
There's lots of different ways to approach it, I guess. At this point, with Upaya's Nomads clinic, we're looking at small and tangible ways to make a difference for the women that we encounter.
Small, like easy but huge.
Yeah, but impactful.
Yeah, absolutely.
One life is one life, but there's definitely lots of ways to help and serve. MedShare is a good organization that you can donate to for birth kits, and they distribute those worldwide.
Boy, just issues that I just take for granted. Didn't even think about. I mean, I know that rural healthcare is not good, especially like I'm very familiar with the Himalayas and Bhutan in particular, but I've been to Nepal and lots of travel in India, but I just didn't like the depth of it and how easy it could be solved to just, make these changes, to be, like you said, so impactful. That's a great word for it.
Nepal in particular is the second poorest Asian country after Afghanistan. And so it's definitely touched my heart to walk through and see the poverty and the lack of resources.
And it's such a beautiful country, too.
Gorgeous, gorgeous, beautiful. And the culture, the people, I mean, so open-hearted, so wonderful. And if we can make a difference for one little community or one woman, one family, it's well worth it.
Well, speaking of one woman, one family, Pasang.
Pasang, yes.
Yeah, Pasang. Could you explain who she is and kind of a little bit about her background? And then I just want to, because it's such a heartwarming story that she's now in the U.S.
Yes.
But you can tell that story.
Yeah, happy to. So Pasang Lamu Sherpa, she is a Tibetan Nepali Sherpa woman, grew up in one of the closest villages to the base of Mount Everest, and comes from a tradition of the men in her family being climbers, alpinists, and when she was a teenager, she was orphaned. Both of her parents died when she was was young, and she became the primary caregiver for her 6-year-old sister. And so she was left, becoming the adult. And she had always loved the mountains and seen her cousins, uncles going up on Mount Everest and longed for that. She'd always, she grew up climbing, hiking, and she became determined to be a mountaineer. And she became one of the Nepal's first woman mountain guide. And she's world class. She's received many, many awards. She has summited K2. She has summited Everest.
Wow.
Many peaks. And she also is a Nomads clinic volunteer. And so she was on the trek this year and just happened to be pregnant.
How far along was she
Oh
when
my
she
goodness.
was on the trek?
She is so amazing, strong, fierce. She, slept on the ground and trekked with us over high, high for me, not for her, but 18,000 foot passes, amazing stuff. And she was 8 months pregnant. She was, by the time we finished, she was 33 weeks pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
And and so she, as you can imagine, she is a strong, fierce, healthy, independent woman. And in our month together, she would help a lot in the women's health clinic tent, and I did an ultrasound on, her baby, and had a lot of conversations with her and her husband about what they were looking for their birth experience. And she expressed a lot of concern that she was frustrated that she had 2 options, either no care or a cesarean. And she felt like, I know my body. I know I'm healthy. I know I can do this. I want to trust the process. I think that, why should I have that taken away from me arbitrarily?
And it would have just been too hard for her to go back to Kathmandu and have a vaginal birth.
It was almost a non-option. So she was fortunate because she had resources to actually go to an OB in Kathmandu. But one of her frustrations was that she would wait 6-7 hours and see the doctor for 5 minutes and was told, you'll probably need a C-section. And they wouldn't say why. And so she wanted to do something different, but she really didn't have the opportunity. She knew that, she told me she had 4 friends who've had babies in the last couple of years, and every single one of them got a C-section. She didn't know anyone who had gone to a hospital and had a vaginal birth. And so in talking with her, because she also does, she guides tours in the U.S., Mount Rainier.
She does. My goodness.
Yeah. Oh, when she was about 24 weeks pregnant, she led 2 excursions to summit Mount Denali during her pregnancy. And, 24 weeks pregnant, so 6 months, she had to medevac one of her clients who broke their legs at 14,000 feet on Denali, and Pasang.
And here she is.
And her tummy.
Months.
Yeah, she put her on a sled, this woman, and hiked down to 7,000 feet and turned around and went back up the same day to lead her clients to the top.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So if she, if this kind of person is told your body is broken, and
she knows better.
Yeah. And so thankfully, I think the stars aligned, and she came after we finished trekking. She tied up some loose ends in Kathmandu
and for her, getting a visa to come to the U.S. wasn't
an issue. Yeah, because she has a special skills visa because she does mountaineering.
She arrives 8.5 months pregnant, and I'm coming to use my special skills, right?
Right. But so she came to Salt Lake City, and
Lexi,
so excited. Oh, Lexi.
No.
So I know. What is it?
Lexi, come on,
wants
Lexi.
to be part of the conversation.
Come on down here. Come down here. Don't you have treats in the kitchen? Why don't you go see the treats in the kitchen?
So when we finished trekking, Pasang came to Salt Lake City, stayed the month before her due date with my family, and her husband came, and interestingly enough, he came a little bit after her. He's a physical therapist in Kathmandu, and so he had a little bit of work to do. And he arrived, and she went into labor the next day.
Oh, my goodness.
I know.
Yeah.
And she had a beautiful birth. I delivered her baby. She gave birth vaginally to a 9-pound, 10-ounce baby boy, almost 10 pounds. Strong, healthy. Yeah, and he's doing great. He's 6 weeks old. I went to visit them because she has an aunt, some of her Sherpa family in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
So she went out to visit them once the baby was a few weeks old. And I just went out to visit, and her 6-week-old baby, I put him on his tummy, doing some tummy time, playing with him, and he just rolled over. And I was like, oh goodness, you're going to be summiting K2 when you're 10.
Yeah.
his tradition, and he's strong like his mama. It's been a beautiful, beautiful experience. But and she has bounced back, and we were out hiking around, exploring when I was out there, and her baby's 6 weeks old, and she's so grateful that she's not still recovering from surgery, and that she and her baby are healthy. And it's one of those things that I've seen over and over. When women are listened to, when they are able to speak their truth, and they can be educated and given options, they universally make the best decisions for them. It's their life, it's their body, it's their baby, it's their birth. And just like with Pasang, thankfully, she was able to get the options that she wanted. But it also is heartbreaking that there are women who don't have those options. And that's where, again, we hope to make a difference.
Yeah, that is really heartbreaking. I'm going to follow that thread, but I'm going to switch directions a little bit, because what you're saying is that when we know our truth and we have the means and we have options before us, we're able to make the right decisions. But there's something in that, though, that says we live in the land of kings and queens. Right. Here in the United States. Most people have the means to make a lot of decisions, a lot of choices.
Yeah.
Yet we don't make the decisions. We don't make the choices that are best for us.
Yeah.
Is it such a strong cultural pressure, and that's the reason why we don't do it? Why we don't make the best decisions for ourselves?
I think that, in our culture, there's so much information coming at us, and for as many choices as we think we have, there's still a lot of cultural expectations put on women. And I think a lot of our limitations are what we believe for ourselves. If my mom never went on a month-long adventure, which she didn't, and she was fairly alarmed that I was going to do that, and oh dear, I'm so worried for you, and and thankfully, I haven't taken on that baggage, that there would be any reason that I wouldn't be able to go and hike and sleep on the ground and do 18,000-foot passes.
Have you traveled abroad prior to that?
Yeah, not tons, though. So I definitely, love the outdoors. I have 4 children we were talking about.
Yeah.
And so...
And just say their ages again.
Yeah. So I have 2 daughters. They're 17 and 12, and then my sons are 10 and 5. So a lot of my limitations were, you could say, self-imposed, because I chose to have these wonderful kids. But the tethers of breastfeeding and, just kids in
bondage,
school.
Sure,
yeah, all of that.
Absolutely.
I haven't had as much flexibility to be able to adventure, but there's always, we live in Utah, there's always weekend adventures, there's always daily adventures. But this is because my youngest is now, he was 4 when we went to Nepal. A world of possibilities has opened up in the last couple of years. My first kind of foray into independent adventuring was in 2016, just the year before. I went by myself to Israel, where my great-grandfather and my grandfather's siblings all grew up, and I went by myself and drove around the country and saw every
Did your mom
part.
gasp at that
Oh,
also?
yes, of course.
But at least there was a family tie-in there,
Yeah.
so that makes it a little bit easier. You're going to check on the roots and kind of understand the family history better.
Yeah, but it taught me that, again, it was only fear and other people's opinions
and other people's fears too that they try to impose on you.
Right. But I knew for myself that it'd be a grand adventure. And that...
How did you know that? Especially because I can only imagine with 4 kids, and in 2016, your youngest would have been, 3, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That was there a lot of doubt for you also, or were you really solid in your thinking about that?
I think the doubts always creep in, especially for me. It's always a few days before, like, just your mind starts running like all the catastrophes that never happened.
Well, it just becomes so real at that point.
That's probably it. But it was something that I had been thinking about for a handful of years. And I think I just followed my heart. I just trusted. And certainly, did my research, but I've gotten this far in life. Why would an 18-hour plane ride or renting a car in shekels instead of dollars? Why wouldn't I be able to do that, number one? And why wouldn't I want to? I always tell my kids, and they probably get sick of hearing this, is that the things that are hard in life are the things that are valuable. Anything I've done in my life that's been worth doing has been hard. And that's how we grow. That's how we gain self-esteem. That's how we learn what we're capable of. And I think because I've pushed myself in smaller ways in the past, I had the confidence that I can make this happen. And it was a wonderful, beautiful experience to, explore the tunnels of Jerusalem, to go to the Dead Sea and float by myself and meet like-minded people and go to my great-grandfather's gravestone and have it repaired, and just all those things that were important to me.
How did you get your family on board with it? And maybe specifically your husband, which I don't know your husband. I'm sure he's the greatest guy on earth because you're very nice yourself. But I think anybody would have that. Like I have the greatest guy on earth, just for the record.
I know.
Yeah.
We both do.
Yeah, we do. But I also know that there would be a lot of angst within me if I said, hey, I'm going to go take off. I mean, he knows me now. We've been together long enough that that's what I do because it's my business, quote unquote. Yeah. But I can imagine someone, and we don't have kids either, but somebody who has kids who's working here. How do you broach the subject like, hey, I think I'm going to take this trip without you. I'm going to leave you with the kids, the 4 kids.
Well, I think a little bit two-pronged was that I had been wanting to take that trip for a couple years, and he, for whatever reason, life busy, work stuff, hadn't really made it a priority, and it wasn't necessarily what his heart was singing at the time. So I totally honor that. And I felt like, his path was his path and I wasn't going to take that personally, but I also appreciated that he respected that for me, that's where my heart was leading. And so,
it wasn't a surprise to him.
Right.
You didn't over breakfast, over Cheerios one morning.
Yeah.
Dropped it on him. Yeah.
It was about probably a year and a half conversation. And the way that it worked out was that I actually went back with him about 4 months later, and I was his tour guide, and it was kind of perfect. But I think everyone has different levels of wanderlust, and for me, it runs deep. And for him, he likes someone to kind of hold his hand and walk through. He's a little bit more nervous, like going through the Israeli airport where security is very tight. I'm like, just let me do the talking.
Right. And they're probably carrying AK-47s.
Yeah. And they kind of grill you. And so I'm like, let me do the talking. Because, his personality is like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I'm like, no, you just be calm, confident, tell them the truth. You're on your way. So everyone travels and adventures differently. I'm quite content and find it exhilarating to do my own thing and not have to say, do you want to go here? Well, I want to do this today. But I also enjoy traveling with people too. It was a blast to take him back and have our own adventure together.
Yeah. And you have family in town that can take care of the kids.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a combination of family and
so
hired
that makes
babysitter.
it easier.
Yeah.
Well.
We're fortunate that, we have people that
good.
can watch the kids when needed.
So I want to go back because prior to recording, we talked about a couple of things about how you found out about the Nepal trip. And that was your time at the Upaya Center in Santa Fe, as we mentioned.
Yes.
And you said that you had been a meditator and then you decided to go down there and take a retreat.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So it is interesting how if you open yourself to new opportunities and adventure, how it finds you in small and big ways. So for a handful of years, I have been a daily meditator. I have been off and on and yoga for 20 years, but it became a more powerful thing. And I had a friend, another midwife, or two midwife partners who were going to Upaya Zen Center on a fairly regular basis, and asked if I wanted to go to this retreat with Roshi Joan Halifax and Sharon Salzberg. And I jumped at the chance because I think they're both master teachers, and to go and sit and learn from them and meditate for 3 days in that community sounded beautiful.
It was just a 3-day retreat.
Yeah.
That sounds very doable.
Yeah, it really was low commitment, high yield for me.
So many of the retreats, especially like the silent retreats. Was this a silent retreat?
No, it was at times like we would hold silence maybe for 12 hours, but it wasn't a full silent retreat.
I know a lot of the silent retreats are like 10-day full on.
7 to 10 day.
Yeah, difficult. But 3 days sounds doable.
Yeah, it was a little bit of dipping my toe in the water.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful experience. And unexpectedly, Roshi Joan Halifax was mentioning in one of her Dharma talks that she had just gotten back from her yearly Nomads clinic trek in Nepal. And then she continued teaching. And as I'm meditating, my brain is just going back to that. Whoa, Nomads. Yeah, like it just immediately spoke to me. And I thought, I've got to get involved. If there's any way in any capacity from the U.S. or boots on the ground, whatever I can do, I want to be a part of this. And thankfully they had a need and we had a connection.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
Yeah, Roshi, Joan Halifax is a fierce woman warrior. And so I think it was definitely a meeting of the minds. She wanted to help the women of Nepal and has been for years. But it was definitely, I call them cosmic connections.
Yeah, I've been down to the center before, but only just to kind of visit it, just to walk the grounds. I do a yearly culinary tour to Santa Fe. And so I had some extra time one day and I drove up. But now I'm so intrigued. I want to go back and check into it.
It's a beautiful community. Yeah, for the person like me who is not, from the Zen tradition, hasn't taken vows, isn't actually Buddhist, to the people who live there in that Sangha, in that community for years and have dedicated their lives, there's a space for everyone.
What drew you to meditation?
I think it was having 4 kids and a stressful job that I also love, and finding that over the years, that mind-body connection, that when I am doing yoga or I'm out connecting in nature, it's recharging to me, and I'm more balanced and I can handle more, and so for me, taking the time to sit and be still, it translates into all areas of my life that I'm more balanced and I have more energy and for all the roles that I need to walk through on a daily basis. And I think for me, it has been kind of a positive feedback loop. Now that I've been doing it for about 3 years daily, I notice, like I always do it first thing in the morning, but every once in a while, I'll get called out of bed for a birth at 5:30 in the morning. I got to get there really quick. And suddenly it's noon and I haven't meditated. And I feel it. So at this point, it's muscle memory.
Yeah, it's necessary. Yeah. Totally get it. One of the other things that you had mentioned to me just in our conversation earlier before we were recording is that you just started climbing most recently.
Yes.
I'm really intrigued because I shared with you that I just started running at 46 or something, ran my first marathon at 50.
Wow.
Which listeners hear lots about because
fabulous.
I'm constantly talking about it. But I found it intriguing that you're 40, you turned 40 in Nepal, you said, and that you just started climbing recently. And it seems like climbing is no, you start when you're 18, you start when you're 20. So you just started. What drew you to climbing?
Well, I had a couple friends who are climbers, and I've always loved hiking, but they just invited me one day, and I found I loved it. I'd done a little bit of climbing and rappelling, younger with living in Utah. There are a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, lots.
And so whether it was someone I was dating who was into climbing, those kind of things, I had a smidge idea that it at least looked fun. And it was fun when I did, the tiny amount of it. But I just decided, hey, let's try it. And I found out that it's another kind of meditation for me. It's in my busy life, it is a place where it's kind of that flow state.
Right. Where you have to stay focused.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I love about birth is because it is so instant. It is so moment to moment.
You're not checking your email.
Exactly. You're all in and it's a gift to be fully present. And I find that when I'm climbing, it's the same thing. The inner dialogue that follows me, throughout the day shuts off and I'm fully in my body, and it's a beautiful thing. It's also, fun exercise. It's a challenge.
You get out in the fresh air.
Right. And it's exciting to see that I can do things that I never knew. And I'm growing.
And that age doesn't matter.
Right. I almost think that I'm probably better now than I would have been 10 years ago because I don't have that fear or those arbitrary expectations. I'm not looking around when I'm at the climbing gym going, is that person better than me? Or is that person judging me? Or is my hair I'm there for me. I don't have time for things that don't feed my soul. That's what I've learned. I've learned that when I listen to my heart and I honor my inner voice, which it's a trial and error thing. But that's one of the things I've committed to in the last handful of years, that if it doesn't feed my soul and it doesn't help other people, if it doesn't fall into those two categories, I don't have a need for it.
I learned recently from another podcaster whom I admire, and he talks a lot about having a life philosophy and how important it is to have a life philosophy. And it sounds like you just, whether you probably don't call it your life philosophy, but it's just that it's got to feed your soul and help other people.
Yeah.
And that's a very special. It's very special that you know that about yourself.
Yeah.
For one.
Yeah, I'm grateful. But I think that trying new things and exploring, that's also how you find that inner truth. And it becomes more and more clear as you try different things and you go, that doesn't necessarily feed my soul, or you might find that valuable, but I don't.
And you have to be honest with yourself too. And sometimes that's hard, being honest with yourself about you're going down a path. You don't want to stop it. Or you don't want to turn around.
Yeah,
because you've told people, and you're invested, and people know what you're doing.
Yeah. And also, I think I have given myself more room to fail and more room to be just average. I used to feel like if I was going to do something, I had to do it perfectly. And now, going back to, like you said, the philosophy I didn't realize that kind of guides me in my life is I don't need to set arbitrary goals or restrictions or what society says I should be doing at this stage of my life. does it feed my soul and does it benefit others, then I'm in.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. 2 other things here. This is the Be Bold podcast, and I always ask people, what does it mean to you to be bold?
To be bold, I think, is to lean into that uncomfortable place, to find the balance between trusting your truth, speaking your truth, pushing yourself towards the things that are calling your name, and knowing that some things are going to be spectacular failures and some things are going to be spectacular. And I think that as long as we don't put limitations on ourselves, we can be bold in every endeavor. It's bold to sit with my 5-year-old when he's telling me about something that's not interesting, and and I can smile
and you can rally.
Or to look at it, a new idea, to
ask the checkout clerk how she's doing today.
Sometimes it's just that simple soul connection that if I stop worrying so much about myself and what I need to do, I can be bold in putting myself out there. Basically, to be bold is to live your truth and trust your truth and embrace the adventures that come, because they'll find you.
Yeah, they will. Definitely be flexible when they do find you, too. And then finally, I don't know if you personally are on social media, if people can find you, but at least the work that you're doing, if you want to talk about that. And again, I'll link to those items in the show notes.
I'm on Facebook, Angel Murdock, Angel Weinstein Murdock. Also on Instagram as the Mindful Midwife. So you can follow me there. And there's a lot of stuff from Nomads Clinic as well on there. But you can follow Upaya Zen Center and, follow their links to Nomads Clinic, as well as Dolpo Tulku Rinpoche, his foundation. He is on Instagram under Dolpo Tulku, which is DOLPOTULKU. But you can see a lot of the Nomads Clinic and Winter Clinic stuff posted.
And if people wanted to donate, is that a possibility? Is there a way to donate to the clinics and for the kits and everything?
Yes.
Which website would that be through?
The best one is Upaya Zen Center. If you go, there is a donate directly to Nomads Clinic. So it goes directly to that. And that's for the whole Nomads Clinic entity of the yearly month-long trek. But you can also, if you follow me on social media, the particular fundraising that we do for the menstrual hygiene kits and the women's health clinic supplies and meds, you'll see those from time to time. And if you want to donate directly, just for the menstrual hygiene kits, if you follow me, you'll see that come up. So,
well, thanks so much for coming up here too to Park City. I know you live in Salt Lake City, but you came up to Park City where I am.
Yeah, it's been
because
fun.
You thought it was going to be maybe a little noisy with your 4 kids, and here we have Lexi barking like a mad dog.
Cute Lexi.
Yeah. So thanks again, and this is just delightful.
It's been great.
Yeah, and I really appreciate learning about all of this too. It's just amazing. I know the listeners will as well. So thanks.
Thanks for letting me share.
Boy, that sounded like an amazing adventure and such rewarding work. Angel just confirmed that she's definitely going to be part of the trip this September. So she's going to be returning to the region, and I just know that she's super excited about that. Definitely check out what Nomads Clinic is doing, and that's on the Upaya Zen Center site. And seriously, I've already been checking out their website for a retreat. It just sounds heavenly. A reminder that if you like what you hear on this podcast, please take a moment to subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. And if you're on an iPhone, all you have to do is click on that little purple podcast icon and search for Be Bold. Please do share this episode with anyone whom you think might enjoy it. You probably know someone who's done volunteer work abroad or who's traveled to Nepal or even who's a midwife that might like to hear this conversation. You can find out more about me by visiting wanderlustandlipstick.com. If you feel like being bold yourself, you can join one of our Wander Tours. We just had a couple of spots open up on our Ireland trip in April, so consider that if you've been wanting to get to the Emerald Isle. We also have a few spots available on North India, Africa, and that Africa trip actually includes a trek up Kilimanjaro, a Tanzania safari, and gorilla trekking in Rwanda. You can do one of those, or you could do all three. We've also got a few spots on Papua New Guinea, as well as a culinary tour to Santa Fe, and that's women only. You'll find all of those on wandertours.com. If you'd like to connect with me, you can friend me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. Sign up for my newsletter on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and you'll receive a series of tips for making your travels safer. And finally, the ladies can join us on our Be Bold Facebook group. We've got about 2,500 members in that group, all ladies. It's where we share our goals, we talk about our setbacks, and it's where you can find words of encouragement and inspiration from others. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.